Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peaver, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peaver, decision expert. And as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that we wish we could go back on. Today, I have Jenna Martin as my guest. Jenna is the gentle social media strategist with explosive results. And I can attest to that because if it weren't for Jenna, this podcast would not exist. So Jenna, thanks so much for joining me today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind listeners that I ask all my guests what their most favorite app is on their phone outside of social media. So you'll want to stay to the end to hear what Jenna has to say, because we get some really great suggestions. You'll also want to stay to the end to get access to my latest freebie. So Jenna, we're going to take this step by step. And as it relates to your decision that you've so graciously offered to share with us today, I want you to set the stage for us. Tell us about the background, how old you were, where you were living, what you were working on, all those things. Let's get started.
Okay, so let's get started. So first off, Dana, you're one of the most impressive people I've met in my life. Your ability to be so intelligent, but convey so much care and thoughtfulness around things. It's just a joy to be in your field.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm so excited for this podcast. So I had to make the courageous decision to start my own business. It's huge. I've had to make several courageous decisions, but that was probably the biggest, most life-altering one. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be able to relate to this one. So I'm really excited to dive in. So tell me a little bit about, where your life was at when you were faced with making this decision.
Yeah, so I went to Cal State Long Beach.
Okay.
I got my bachelor's of science in biology. I
Wow.
went to acupuncture school and got my master's in oriental medicine, and then decided to quit.
Wow.
Which, yeah, it's a little bit crazy. But I think a lot of people can relate to being a free spirit, not fitting into the mold, unintentionally attracting creative, narcissistic type bosses, and just not really fitting into a certain mold. And then getting to a certain age where you realize you have to have retirement, waiting for you on the other end. So you do have to work. And my family started to fall apart as well. So my boyfriend broke up with me. We're together and thriving now. But at that point, literally every single aspect of my life was imploding or exploding. And I'm smiling, but it was terrifying.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Jenna, how old were you at the time?
Well, let's see. It was 2018 where everything really came to a head. So I had tried with my master's degree. I'm good at acupuncture. I was exhausted and tired doing it every day. I think a lot of people can relate to being an empath, and even further an unhealed empath. So you take on people's stories, their emotions, and life gets really heavy. So it was I don't know what age I was in 2018, but a couple years ago. I'm 36 now.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I think when you're struggling with self-worth, you attract these certain individuals into your life and patients who need a lot because you're good at giving, because you can perceive people's needs, but it can get toxic if you don't have healthy boundaries or know how to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Let's go back a little bit. So you finished high school. So
Mhm.
tell me what, like, from a year perspective, how many years you were in post-secondary and what all that looked like and where you were living and with whom and that kind of thing.
Oh gosh, okay.
Not
So
just
all
top
my
line for me.
so yeah, so I graduated high school. I was good at biology, so I did biology in college
Mhm.
at Cal State Long Beach. I was there for 5 years. Around the fourth year, I figured out that I didn't fit in with dentists or doctors or pharmacists, who I was surrounded by, even though I love them and need them and appreciate them in my life.
Mhm.
And I just started to do soul searching, and acupuncture came across my field. The idea of yin and yang and channels and systems that could be healed through ancient forms of wisdom was just like, whew,
Fascinating.
this is so
Mhm.
exciting. So I traveled all the schools in California for acupuncture and settled in the one in San Diego.
Okay.
So I had lived at home until I moved to San Diego for acupuncture school.
Okay. And how long was school for that?
Acupuncture was also, well, it should have been 5 years, but I think it was more like six.
Okay.
It was
But
also
still a quite a huge commitment. It wasn't like an
it
8 month
wasn't,
course or anything like that.
no.
Was I assume there was a lot of practical and that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, so heavy exams. We also had to know Western because we had to know which nerves, what the nervous system does, what different vessels to hit or not hit. Like, there were different things you would do for different impacts, but you had to understand the Western side of things to deal with the patients coming in, the prescriptions they were on, the diagnoses they were getting, and translate it to this ancient wisdom and somehow make it all work.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is that you spent about 10 years in post-secondary. And so you graduate from acupuncture school, accredited. And tell me about how long between your graduation and until you realized that maybe this just wasn't the right path for you.
Yeah, it was like a year and a half.
Wow.
It was so horrible and so embarrassing. I was so exhausted and beat up. It was so hard to heal people and hear their stories. And I think a lot of people could relate to that too, that when you've accumulated your own wounds and then you're an empath and you get tired, then taking on 7 patients a day is a lot when you need time to heal. Yeah. So I
Wow.
was
Wow.
I felt like the walls kept, or just the weight kept getting heavier and heavier and heavier, to the point where I actually ended up going home and crashing on my parents' couch. Yeah.
Wow.
I was so exhausted by individuals I had encountered, and just life at that
Wow.
point. Yeah.
Jenna, you're reminding me that so my post-secondary path was a little haphazard as well. I went to school for psychology and thought that I would be treating, patients on a regular basis. And I realized I halfway through that I wasn't going to be able to take on that energy every day. I wasn't going to be able, like, I wanted to bring positivity to people's lives. And I knew that you could do that in a roundabout way through psychology, but there would be a lot of, trudging through muck almost, to get to that. And I should have been a millennial because I just want to get to the good stuff, right? I just want to do the happy, the fun, the fixing stuff. So I
Yeah.
realized at that point as well that definitely wasn't the right path for me. So it sounds like you had a really similar epiphany after having lived the weight of that for a year and a half.
Yeah, yeah. And, now helping other entrepreneurs, I know we're not there yet, but a lot of people get so excited about going down the healing path. You end up bringing up a lot of your own stuff that you need to be healed. And then, like you said, you have to trudge through a lot of people's own problems and understand them so that you can do a good job of helping them heal. And, I think there's a lot of shame that you're either not passionate or that you're not good at what you do if you can't handle large volumes of patients. And so I've definitely in this day and age helped a lot of people see that you don't have to do that to prove you're a good healer. Owning your own body and having healthy boundaries is what a good healer does. You don't have to go to some standard. And of course, you have to make an income. So that's where a lot of these women are coming online for secondary sources. But
Right.
I had to make the decision that my body and mental health was more important than what my friends and family thought of me, what I thought of me. It was hard because when you're a people pleaser, your feel goods are gone after that because you're not helping anyone and the air gets really quiet and it's really interesting.
Wow. So Jenna, you and I have talked quite a bit, outside of the podcast. And I know I mentioned to you that, you're an old soul and you've experienced a lot of things in your life that a lot of women don't become aware of until later on, based on circumstances that they're in. So I think you have so much to offer with the experiences that you've successfully pushed through, that like I learn from you every day. So
Oh,
I want you to know that, because you even during this podcast, I'm already thinking about things that are impacting me that I wasn't necessarily aware of or didn't consider previously. So I just wanted to do a little call out to thank you for that.
yeah, thank you.
I want to go back to, when you realized that you couldn't continue down the path you were on. So were you still back at your parents? I know you said you had gone back for a reprieve. So you were back at your parents. What was your relationship situation? I know you mentioned there was some rocky times there.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, going back. So around the time I got there, my parents are great. So they treated me as an adult coming back in, which I feel like is really rare. They were sad about me letting go of acupuncture, but they had full faith in my capabilities that I would figure something out. So I do feel like I had a rare foundation to crash and be allowed to crash. Like a lot of parents are like, you don't want to do acupuncture. What's your plan? And my mom had seen um, you know, I have so many different decisions to share, but I had been through spiritual communities where those thoughts were very toxic to who I was, like toxic positivity, for
Right.
example, where you're too positive, so everything is being suppressed. So she let me crash, she let me sleep, she let me slowly unfold what had happened. So as a parent, I know a lot of parents want their kids to rush on to the next thing, but I couldn't have accomplished what I accomplished today had she not let me
Yeah.
fully just unravel, basically.
Wow. So thanks, mom. Yeah.
Thanks, Mom, if you're watching. Just kidding.
Hi, mom.
Watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so once I healed, my dad's Parkinson's started to express very heavily. So I was ready to go back out into the world. I had found myself, I had found my voice, and then boom. And then a family member started to struggle. So my mom valiantly reached out and tried to help their situation, and it was a disaster, toxic, horrible. So all of a sudden, I was carrying my dad through Parkinson's through this loved one dynamic. That was very toxic, and it was so hard to have found myself and be stuck again. I was like, wow, how did this happen? Right when
Wow.
I was ready, and what does this mean? And who am I now in this situation? Do I um say this is not mine and leave? Or do I stand by my parents who have stood by me through so many things and see them through? Because there wasn't really a in between, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And it's popular right now to stomp off and go do your own thing, which is really, really healthy. But if my parents had done that to me, I wouldn't be healed
Mhm. Mhm.
today. So I just decided that in each situation, it's always going to be different. So how did I feel about this today? And I decided to stick with them through it. And I started my business online because I was like, what the heck? At this point in my life, I have nothing to lose,
Right.
literally nothing. Like everything had fallen apart. And I started my online business out of a closet in this horrible situation, doing a podcast episode. I'm not in a closet right now. But I was in 2018. And then definitely in 2020, and then things started to get better, and then the world crashed. So I crashed, my relationship crashed, my family crashed, and then the world crashed. It was
Wow.
like, who am I now? I kept coming back to that.
Wow.
Um,
So, like, I just feel the weight of all those
oh,
crashes.
sorry. Yeah, it was a lot.
Wow. Um, so at that point, then obviously when COVID hit and that kind of thing, everything was going online. So maybe a positive was the fact that you were already in that space and you didn't have to shift or pivot. So that could have been maybe one positive you took out of
Yes,
that
one
whole,
silver lining.
yeah,
And
yeah.
time with my parents when they eventually pass, I'll have no regrets because I know I did what was true to my heart in that situation.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. And I applaud you for that because that's not an easy ask of any child,
Yeah.
especially one with the weight of the world that you were carrying at that point in time. So I can't even fathom what helped you through. Do you know where you found your resolve? Do you know what it was that pulled you through?
Yeah, so I can attribute it to two things. Finding the joy in the little moments. My mom and I learned to laugh in utter chaos. Like literally when you should not be laughing. We would joke we'd either laugh or cry, and we did both. And we had had some tensions. All mothers and daughters go through different phases,
Mhm.
but at that point, we're just like, let's have fun. We're stuck. So let's just have a great time
Make the best of
with our
it.
time together and be stuck. So I enjoyed flowers more. I enjoyed walking the dog more. Things that we take for granted every single day was like so beautiful. Gives you some perspective. The second thing was 5-minute moments. So I built my whole business off of 5-minute moments. That's all I had between caring for my dad. So 5 minutes when I woke up, 5 minutes before I started, 5 minutes, and I would have these conversations and start conversations. And eventually, as we got more settled, I had an hour to give. And then I kept building it until today where I don't have to work. My dad got to the point where I couldn't provide the medical care he needed, or my mom, so he's in a nursing home. And so even though it was hard, the gift I gave to them then returned again to, it's like it keeps bouncing back and forth. So I got to start a business where I get to work from home. I'm starting off later in life with my relationships, so I could potentially have kids when I'm almost there. Once I get to a certain point where I wouldn't have been able to financially have sustained that on my previous trajectory.
Mhm.
So it was painful, but so much beauty came out of it. Yeah. So yeah,
Absolutely.
those are the two jewels, the 5-minute moments that there's no excuses if you really want something. And then the joy, just enjoying the little things.
Wow. And if like to me, those are so simple, but they feel like they were so impactful in flipping a switch for you in terms of your happiness and your direction and your purpose and your passion. There's just so many things that kind of folded into those decisions that you made.
And healthy boundaries. Those are important too, especially when you're giving so much. You have to go do you. You have to go, if, you know, my parents may have wanted me to do all these things. I would say I can until July of this month, and then something else needs to be figured out. So again, you can just, there's situations where you're meant to let go and just leave and do you, but I didn't feel like this was that situation, and I didn't want them to hurt for something they weren't doing intentionally.
Right.
So I slowly set boundaries to make my way out and do me again. And they felt respected. I felt good about myself. And again, there have been situations where I have said completely no, and I've gone off and done my own thing too. So I
Mhm.
really think you have to listen to your internal guidance about where your healthy boundaries are and then act on it. Because sometimes it's running and doing you, and then other times it's like completely giving yourself because you know it's right, and then there's in betweens too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think what you're showcasing is the awareness that you had as you were moving through those situations. And I think that takes a lot to get to, because you can be in a situation and you can exit it feeling really drained, but not acknowledge through it why or what. Right. And then I think once you gain that awareness, which is what you did, you can approach a situation that you know might be taxing or toxic or whatever. And if you make the decision to engage, which is what you've done, and I'm not saying that that was a toxic situation, but it
It
taxing,
was.
right? Right.
Yeah.
Um, that you have those boundaries and you're kind of gut checking all the way through as to where you're at and how much you can actually handle. And
Yeah.
I think that's, you can still make the decisions to play that game or to, jump in, but you recognizing the whole way through where your heart is really at. And I think you're showcasing that in spades, and I'm
Thank you.
again, I applaud you, because that's not something, the last book I wrote, The Decision to Live, the year she wiped the fog off the mirror. There's so many people who don't even know that fog exists, and I feel like you were really clear about what that fog was, or got really clear, and knew to keep your mirror pretty clean all the way along.
Thank you. I never thought of it that way. When I read, or when you expressed your book title, I bought it that day because I was like, I know that feeling of that fog being on the mirror. It's like you're so exhausted, and for this is what it translated to for me from your title, was like you're so exhausted, you get out of the shower, you know you need to look at yourself in the mirror to get ready, and there's fog, but you're too tired, so you're just staring at it.
Mhm.
That's what it meant for me. And your book was so impactful because it represented the second phase for me, which was deciding to do myself, which I really needed. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad. I feel like you had a big head start before you even read my book, but anyway.
It's all good. It was validating so you can let things go. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Going back to all the decisions that you were faced with and that you were making, tell me a little bit about how you approached them. Like, did you have a system? Did you talk to somebody? Did you write things down? How did you work through?
Gosh, that's a good question. Um, I think because of what I had experienced in the health world, I learned that my stomach tells me what to do, and that I have to use discernment, which is more of the intellect, to decide if I can apply that as in my day to day.
Mhm.
So normally, so for my parents, I think there's like a will. So if you have the will to do something, then for me, I do it so long as the discernment does all the good double checks. But if you feel obligated or guilted or feel guilty, for me, my stomach will feel really weak. And then I know it's, even though I could help, it's not meant for me.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard to say no. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel again, your journey has allowed you or given you permission to say no, to respect what's best for you. And
Yeah.
as, but at the same time, you're still honoring those other people. But you're putting yourself first. And I see so often how hard that is for women, especially. And I'm again, kudos to you for acknowledging and having that balance because it's not easy to achieve.
Yeah, yeah, I was curious about what you thought because a lot of people, a decision is black and white, but I found all of mine in the gray. So I know you're the decision expert. So I was curious what you thought about that because that was my experience at least.
It's really interesting. So the system that I've developed and that I teach pairs that. It pairs the logical with the emotional. It pairs the heart and the mind. Because you explore all the factors that you're taking into consideration, and they're not just black and white factors. You are allowed to look at how things make you feel, how other people will be impacted by what your decision might be, and you get to incorporate all of that into your decision making process. So what you've done is exactly what I expect of anybody that I work with, because you
Okay.
are looking at both sides. So you did it without even knowing. You used the system that I have lived by for 30 years, on your own. And certainly I could help, fine tune a little bit here and there, and give
Okay,
you an
thank you.
app that gives you a mathematical score and percentage that really validates your gut. Because ultimately, as you become um, entrenched in the decision making system that I use, that's what happens. Your gut tells you before you even have to use the app, when you get so good at it. So I feel like you're already well on your way to being a really strong and impactful decision maker. So you're ahead of the game in terms of what you've done and the work that you've already done on your own.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I could have used your help though during that time because I was making those decisions, but not confidently. I didn't know what else to do.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're here now because you've got me for the rest of your life now.
I know, see.
Whatever you're
Yeah.
facing. So, Jenna, I want to ask you one final question just about the decision. Is there anything that you would share with our listeners, or any suggestions or tips that you would give if they were faced with similar situations?
Yeah. So one thing that I see, especially helping female entrepreneurs, I don't have the expertise you do, but that you can get creative with solutions. And that's part of my branding, even. And it means so many things. But so we tend to think we either have black or white decisions. And we don't realize that at the root of it, people who are in conflict, generally, when you get down to the root of the root of the root of the problem, they both want a similar thing. So how can you take each person's needs and what has meaning to them and then like create a solution that's somewhere in the middle? And that helped me a lot when I was in the work world because I oftentimes you're stuck between your team and then your supervisor or director or whoever it is. It's like where it's like black and white, you do or you don't. And I learned very quickly to find the common root of everyone's needs and say, if this person does this, then you get that. And it's like horse trading or whatever, but it seemed to work so that you can get creative. You're never truly stuck.
Mhm.
I feel like some people are in certain situations, but at large.
Well, and that actually, that for me, that's step two of the system that I use, right? Which is looking at your options and being
Oh, yeah.
creative in,
Yeah.
figuring out what you actually do have in front of you. So, but I think that's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah. Well, I just think you're brilliant at what you're doing, like empowering so many women to make empowered decisions. Not a lot of women like have the confidence and strength to choose themselves or to like again, find those common denominators and make better decisions that they think they don't have. So I really admire what you're doing.
You're so cute. I feel like what I have to offer is, like you said earlier, you were okay making the decision, but you had no confidence in it.
Zero.
And
None.
I'm like that is the easiest thing for me to be able to offer, because it's the system, and it works, and it's foolproof, and it's 30 years tested and true, and great decisions. So I can't wait to have you on a future podcast where we're talking about a decision you've made, working through the system, and your, things are smooth sailing.
Cool. I would love that.
All right. So the final question that I have, that I said I was going to ask you, is your favorite app. Now, can't be anything in social media. And I always joke, I'm hoping that you have the Decision Smith app on your phone, so you can't say that one either. I know it's everybody's favorite app, but so outside of those, what would be your most favorite app, Jenna?
You're talking to a social media lady.
I know, that's why those to me are givens almost. So that's why I don't let people use them.
YouTube.
YouTube. Huh.
I like researching new things. I like that YouTube is like a teaching platform. Okay. So not social media related. I learn all these things about gardening. I learn things about personal development. I get inspired there. I enjoy families who share their lives on there. So for me, it's just this whole, it's the thing that keeps me going creatively, seeing all these people share their lives. There's a woman there who has a cottage out in the middle of nowhere in Washington, and each day is her filming the flowers grow. And I just love slices of life. So I'd say YouTube in that case.
Well, and I appreciate that, because that's not something I use it for. Like if I need to Google how to fix something, or, do something specifically, but I haven't explored that side of it. So I will go do that now. So thank you for sharing that side of YouTube that I haven't been exposed to. So
yeah, no problem.
So Jenna, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories with me today. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us as well. If you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peaver, and until next time, make great decisions and do life fun. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch, and don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peaver. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.